we are now going to move to questions, and we've got a lot of ground to cover, so I'm going to ask that you be as obviously incisive and compelling as possible, but brief, succinct, direct answers. I'll start the questioning today, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to start by asking some questions about specific types of business practices and risk management practices that may have contributed to the financial crisis as a way of making this tangible and real. And I want to pick up on your comment, Mr. Diamond, here. I'd like to be brutally honest. Mr. Blankfein, I'm going to start my questioning with you today, and I want to actually pick up on your comment, your testimony about the fact that there were, and I think I'm paraphrasing this correctly, that there were financial products and practices that may have served no essentially good or productive purpose in the financial system. Recently, you've made a few comments. To just read you a couple of quotes. You said in November of last year, listen, there was a lot of negligent behavior, improper bad behavior that has to be fixed and sorted through. We don't take ourselves out of that. I include ourselves in that. You also said we participated in things that were clearly wrong and we have reasons to regret and apologize for. What I'd like to ask you is, can you tell me very specifically what are the two most significant instances of negligent, improper, and bad behavior in which your firm engaged and for which you would apologize? That's a vote.
Oh, I see. I'd say the biggest, and I referred to this in my oral testimony just now. I think we, in our behavior, got caught up in, and this is a general mark, to get specific in a second, got caught up in and participated and therefore contributed to elements of froth in the market. So, for example, in leveraged finance, which was our biggest exposure, we are a top service provider to the private equity world. We are a top mergers and acquisition firm in connection with rendering that advice for mergers and acquisitions. We help finance those transactions. Increasingly, those transactions took on higher and higher leverage, which they could not have but for the willingness of financiers to participate in that, and we were a major financier. And moreover, we held those positions for too long, too much concentration in our books. In other words, we sold them down, and if you go through a continuum of people who've had these positions, I don't think, relative to our size, we had more than we should have had, and therefore we had to, and when you go back and look at them, too much leverage in transactions and too much concentration from that leverage on our book.
Would you characterize, looking back on this now, and obviously hindsight's 20/20, but would you look on some of the finances negligent or improper?
In the kind of world that we're in. And when you use terms like that, I always think about standards of behavior and in the context. I think those were very typical behaviors in the context that we were in.
Let me ask you, have you done any kind of internal investigation, kind of large sweep of your activities, and is that, what did you find, and is that something we could have? I'm not, if we have something, of course, we will identify it for you and you can have it. I'm not referring to a specific, I'm referring to the fact that we look at our risks and we look at our positions, and in the tensions and crisis area, we looked at that our balance sheet and the amount of illiquid positions on our balance sheet. That's what I'm referring to. Well, if in fact you have done an internal audit investigation to kind of look at the practices, the mistakes that occurred, we'd like to be able to have that, review it. Obviously, your attorneys, I'm sure, will want to review it before, but absolutely, perhaps something so we can follow up on. Let me move on now. Let me talk about, the issue of conflicts comes up in many respects in the marketplace. Sure. It comes up in compensation, it comes up in trading practices, and I want to ask you about a very specific instance as a way of getting to how things worked and how things might be changing in the future. Based on the review of public documents, as you know, your firm sold a significant amount of subprime mortgage-related securities. And it appears, at least according to public documents and other reports, that you may have simultaneously betted against the securities you sold to clients. According to the reports, you sold about $40 billion in 2006, 2007. December 2006, I think you came to the conclusion the mortgage market was heading south and you began to reduce your own positions. And many of the securities that you sold to institutional investors, other folks, went bad within months of issuance. Now, one expert in structured financing said the simultaneous selling of securities to customers and shorting them because they believed they were going to default is the most cynical use of credit information that I've seen. Do you believe that was a proper legal ethical practice, and would the firm continue to do that practice? Or do you believe that's the kind of practice that undermines confidence in the marketplace?
Well, the way it's, the short answer is, this is the practice of a market maker, and I would like to explain this. But the answer is, I do think that the behavior is improper. You know, we regret the consequence that people have lost money in it. But I just want to explain, and this is a very important, and I appreciate the opportunity to do this because there's so much press swirling around this that I really need to explain. In our market making function, we are a principal. We represent the other side of what people want to do. We are not a fiduciary. We are not an agent. Of course, we have an obligation to fully disclose what an instrument is and to be honest in our dealings. But we are not managing somebody else's money. When we sell something as a principal, which is what we are as a market maker, the next minute that item will have gone up, in which case we'll wish we hadn't sold it that minute, or it will go down, in which case we'll actually be glad we did for our own P&L and sorry for the person who bought it. But we are market makers in that. In most of these cases, the person who came to us for the exposure that they wanted to have.
But Mr. Blankfein, you are actually creating these securities, and let me just tell you, someone who's been in business perhaps my career, the notion that I would make a transaction with you and then the person with whom I made that transaction would then bet that transaction would blow up is inimical to me. And I guess the question is, you weren't purely a broker. You were actually taking subprime product, packaging it up, and selling it under your label, correct?
Let me be clear. We were not a broker at all.
Correct.
Not at all.
Okay, you were a principal.
We were a principal.
Okay.
The act, it wasn't as if we were creating product, that product existed necessarily, and shorting it. The act of selling it was our risk.
Okay.
Let me be clear about that.
So the act of selling, I can understand how, my point is you had a view of the market as you continued to securities. I guess one of the questions I'd ask you is, how do you go to the rating agency with whom I dealt with a lot as treasurer? And how do you persuade them to give many of the tranches the highest ratings, AAA, at the same time that you have credit information that leads you to believe that, in fact, those securities may fail?
Sure, I have to, and another point, the predicate of your question. We are not necessarily, I know if you had looked into Goldman Sachs, we were not controlling our risk. When you listen to the testimony that's come by, the biggest problem that institutions had was the accumulation of risk. We weren't working. A market maker doesn't manage its risk profile because it likes housing or doesn't like housing. Those are separate. We have various pockets of Goldman Sachs that like a position or don't like. What we do is risk management. Because we had this risk, because we were accumulating positions, which, by the way, we acquire from clients who want to sell them to us, we have to go out ourselves and provide and source the other side of the transactions so that we can manage our risk. These are all exercises in risk management.
Well, I'm just going to be blunt with you. It sounds to me a little bit like selling a car with faulty brakes and then buying an insurance policy on the buyer of those cars. It doesn't seem to me that that's a practice that inspires confidence in the markets. I'm not talking about your own positions. I'm talking about betting against
an asset here is an institution, probably professional-only investors dedicated, in most cases, to this business.
Representing pension funds who have the life savings of police officers.
These are the professional investors who want this exposure. Let me ask you, in the current market today, things are...
Let's move on, because of time.
I think these are important matters. I think this is one of the most critical questions that are revolving around here.
And then I have a question to follow up on this.
No, I understand. We are sitting here today with people commenting in the press, gee, the equity market is being driven by more bubbles because of the liquidity in. And the equity market is right, and we're in a recovery. No one really knows. Yet people are coming to us as a market maker. I want exposure to the equity market. I don't want exposure to the equity market. We have to make sure the products do what the products say, that they're honest, that they're disclosure, and there are laws that do this. But we are an institutional firm, and this is the highest part of the institutional market. Even today, by the way, people are coming to us for exposure to these very instruments, not at 100 cents of the dollar, but 8 cents on the dollar, because they think it's going to be worth 12 cents, and other people are saying it because they think at 8 cents it's going to go to 4 cents. That's what a market is, and our role as a market maker creates the liquidity.
I do know what a market is, but I want to ask you this question. Did you always disclose to every investor that in fact you were taking the contrary positions, or just yes or no? Is that consistently disclosed?
The position doesn't fit. We were selling as a principal. When we sold, we were